Hey all, this is Ed,
And this is Kara.
and this is your day's dumpster fire. God, I hope this works. Oh yeah.
It worked.
Well, that was shocking. I was expecting that to go sideways, like, instantly.
Like everything else.
I mean, it's just the way life works when you're trying to create a podcast, is that you expect it to work, and then you just get used to the fact that it won't work.
Correct. I guess it helps you plan for the worst and have happy surprises when you don't have to make those plans.
I would say it helps you prepare for the worst, but then you know what to do with it when the worst does happen.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I feel like that's just sound advice for anybody. Like, always prepare for the worst, but don't be happy when you have a slightly worse outcome. You know what to do when it actually does turn out to be the worst of the worst situation.
Yeah. I agree.
I mean, and today's episode is a perfect example of that. Maybe if participants in our episode today, maybe if Custer had planned for the worst, it expected the worst, and knew what to do at the worst, maybe a lot less people would have died. But yeah, we'll have to get into that. We're going to get into our third and final installment of the Custer's Last Stand fire, which is fires within dumpster fires within dumpster fires. And this topic, the more I dug into it, the more it just blew me away in terms of its complexity, in terms of how people just completely misunderstood a lot of things, how pop culture got involved and really twisted and contorted things. And it turned into one of these things where, like, the more I dug into it, I suddenly found myself, like, visiting QAnon websites and and just going down the rabbit hole of insanity.
Oh God.
I told myself today, like, okay, this is it. After how many dozens of pages of notes I took, I'm like, all right, this is it. I'm just gonna go with it. I'm going to finish this thing off. I'm going to avoid all the conspiracy theories, like alien
Stick to
abductions.
the facts, man. No aliens. We don't need any aliens.
Yeah, we don't need aliens. We don't need modern day.
As much as I love Slaughterhouse-5, we're not going to go down that route for the Civil War, all right?
Yeah, we're going to leave Vonnegut out of this.
Yeah, no, we don't need any of that madness.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, modern politics aside, we're just gonna leave all that out, and I'm gonna try to keep this in the reference frame of 1876, and I'm gonna try to tie everything into 7 to 10 days, the 7 to 10 worst days of a lot of people's lives, because most people died quickly here, not because of the 1800s of it all, but just because, well, we'll get into it.
Part of it.
But first off, what do you got for a trash can fire?
Okay, real quick, before I give my trash can fire, it has been a very, very frequent pattern where I can't think of a trash can fire. Which isn't to say that my life is perfect. It is absolutely not perfect. I'm brain fried by the time we record. With that being said, I would like to reach out to our listeners and ask them if they have trash can fires to send us their trash can fires at thedaysdumpsterfire@gmail.com. That
Good
way,
call.
if I can't think of anything, or if you can't think of anything, then our listeners, I'm sure, will have something fantastic. So just one more time, thedaysdumpsterfire@gmail.com. Anyway.
Well, and on top of that, if I remember correctly, we've got Instagram up and running too.
Yeah, got Instagram up and running, so follow us there at thedaysdumpsterfire on Instagram. I try to post there frequently, at least once a week, as well as fun facts and tidbits, whatever comes to my brain.
Yeah, you're our little social butterfly when it comes to the social media thing.
I'm trying to make it fun over there on Instagram. So far, we've got a picture of an emu, some radiation warning signs. Winston Churchill
we
with
got a
some
bunch of
music in the
dudes
back.
in World War I lining up for
Yeah,
Gallipoli.
because that's always enjoyable. So yeah, go check us out over there on Instagram. Shoot us a message there. Send us an email, whenever that is. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, let's bring it, because that's I feel like by now, if you're 12 episodes into this podcast, I feel like you have probably thoroughly embraced the notion that failing is not only a part of life, it's an accepted part of life.
Yeah.
And that, not every single plan has to go according to plan. Not every episode of life is a scene from the A-Team. It's, things are supposed to go horribly awry. And I feel like that's kind of the heart of the show. And I feel like when I talk to some of the fans and some of the people that I work with and whatnot, they can always relate to the, like, whether it's their own little instances where, like, holy crap, I thought I had figured this out and turned out that I have no idea what I'm doing. That is no different than, say, Australian government fighting off emus, or Winston Churchill, or Custer, or, some engineer in Russia trying to make the perfect nuclear reactor. It's all going to blow up in your face at some point in time, and it's okay.
That's how we learn.
That's how we embrace it.
That's right. Yeah, so my trash can fire. You know how this entire podcasting process, we've been talking about how I haven't changed a thing and it doesn't sound too bad, but you have all the fancy things and we're still having issues. I will say that after all of that talk and all of my humility about my little setup here, it is turning out to be that it's making your life a lot harder. So we're gonna have to fix that at some point, but that is my little trash can fire. Is that my little mic here picks up everything, including my dog chewing on his toy, or like me clicking and scrolling, and we're gonna fix it, I promise. But
no, like, guys, audience, if you haven't heard, whenever I'm editing an episode, this is Kara.
Yeah.
The whole way through.
I want to be on the same page as you, man. I'm trying to follow along, be a good listener and student.
Like, I have to I create little noise profiles of all the clicks, and then you also have a keyboard that sounds like machine gun fire.
That's why I'm trying not to touch it.
Yeah, I have to, like, isolate each keystroke, and then I create a noise profile and I try to subtract it. But by the time I subtract out all of that, you are so quiet, you're so muffled that I can't understand anything. So what I do is I zoom into the individual wavelength of that click, and then I can crossfade it out. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's taught me a lot, but holy moly. Like, when I listen to, when we listen to, like, Morbid, right? One of the most top-ranked podcasts out there, or Mysterious Universe, or, Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. Like, a lot of these podcasts that I listen to, I've noticed they all do one thing in common, is, and I need to do this myself, if you listen very, very carefully, they don't have a computer up and running. Well, they do, because they're recording, but everything they do is pen and paper. Like, all their notes, like, they print up their notes prior, and as they're going through everything, even scrolling through, like right now I have a Google Doc up of everything that I'm going to be talking about, but even still, you can still hear the click of my mouse. And what I'm noticing, the secret is, the more experienced folks out there, they just print everything up, and then they have a classic pen and paper, and then they modify and take notes and make comments on the fly in that regard, instead of just hearing typing in the background. So I'm thinking I'm going to try that. So, like, when you have your episode coming up here on Hindenburg, not the gas giant flaming blimp guy, but the guy who kind of, like,
The war hero who
Took on Hitler.
accidentally, yeah, that guy.
Yeah. So like when we get to that, I'm actually going to print up your notes, and I'm going to have everything in front of me, and it's going to be paper and pencil, and I want to see if that makes it easier
Cool.
to edit.
That reminds me to go on a quick tangent. One of my students, he was writing an outline, and he got frustrated with the digital format, and he goes, "I'm going to old reliable," and he stomps over the pen, the pencils and the paper, and he goes, "I'm doing it this way." It was very funny.
It's awesome going to old reliable, huh? Just
yep, pen and paper.
I can't say I blame him.
Me neither.
I mean,
I
I'm
was
working
like, that's
on
what I wanted you to do in the first place.
like I'm working on a novel, and I try to handwrite as much of each chapter as possible, because there's something about handwriting. There's something about having a really, really nice pen, having some nice paper, and just handwriting out your ideas, because it forces you to slow down, to not think as fast or think as hurriedly. And I feel like when you do that, you tend to have better ideas and more cohesiveness, as opposed to when you're typing. Because I feel like you can type too fast. If you type too fast, like you look at my notes, you can see all the little blue squiggly lines under everything. Like it's just a
hot mess.
I'm missing a lot of punctuation and hyphens and all sorts of crap. So
yeah, to me, typing is like word vomit. It's like when you start to talk too much and you ramble.
Are you saying I'm word vomit?
No, I'm word vomit. When I type emails and stuff, I have to have at least 2 people read them before I send it, because I know
Really?
it's word vomit. Yeah.
Oh, because you just kind of like just put too much into it?
Either that, or it's either too blunt, it's not sugar-coated enough, or like there's grammar errors everywhere, or it just depends on the email and what I'm writing about, but yeah.
Yeah, working in transportation probably didn't help with that.
No. I'm clear. I get to the point, but
yeah, but there's also a point where tact needs to be.
Yeah. Like my boss the other day literally told me, she read the email, she's like, "You should just call them." I'm like, okay, I will call them. This is why I had you read it.
Like there's 18 pages to this email. We probably you could settle this in a 2-minute conversation.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. I can touch type. That's like the only thing that I have going for me skill wise, is that I don't have to see the keyboard to type. You can blindfold me and cover my hands with a towel, and I can type like 60, 70 words a minute and not think anything of it. But the downside is that whenever I'm reaching out to a customer, or I'm trying to do an incident report or whatever, it is just this monologue of insanity. And it's word vomit.
Yeah. Anyway,
so, yeah.
Enough of the word vomit. Let's get back to the
How did Custer die?
More word vomit.
So yeah, let's dive into this here, because we are at the third part of Custer's Last Stand. If you're just joining us, I would go back like 2 episodes. The first part of this episode, or this first part of the series, we looked at Custer, like where he came from, how he was educated, what he became famous for. It turned out that like this guy was kind of a legit, for the lack of better words, a badass during the Civil War. He led from the front. He had some very good strategies. If you were to look at the Civil War in terms of the cavalry, so these are your horse-mounted soldiers, these were considered like your elite forces, right? The cavalry were fast, they were mobile, they were highly trained, and they can inflict a lot of damage really, really fast if you know how to use them correctly. And I would have to say, for the most part, the Confederate Army probably had the best cavalry officers out there. We're talking guys that taught at West Point on cavalry tactics and whatnot, and then when the war broke out, they sided with the South. So when you look at Custer, a very, very young Custer, being promoted to the rank of general during the Civil War and going up against folks like Jeb Stuart and and whatnot, like in the Battle of Gettysburg, that's a pretty impressive thing. And we focus so much on how Custer was probably like, the way the movies portray him or the media portrays him is like he was delusional. He was out of touch with reality. He had no idea what he was doing. He just relied on his persona and his zeal to make things happen. But in my experience in studying history, somebody who's out of touch with reality or has no idea what they're doing, they tend to get themselves killed off really, really fast. And Custer didn't do that. People who are delusional tend to lose like their first fight, like right off the bat. And Custer didn't do that. So there's parts of me that say that Custer was a bit eccentric. He was maybe over the top. Everybody's had that manager, right? You like you work at a Subway or a McDonald's, right? And you come across that assistant night manager who's like in their 40s, who feel like they are the next CEO of this franchise and their leadership is so inspiring. And you're like, bro, you're 45 years old, you're living at home with your mom, and you're an assistant night manager or a shift manager at a McDonald's.
Yeah.
Like, you want me to look up to that? So I feel like a lot of people kind of historically viewed Custer in that light. But then conversely, Custer was fiercely loyal to his wife. He was fiercely loyal to his country. He would put himself in harm's way to protect his men. And in a lot of respects, yeah, the guy was kind of weird, but he was also very genuine. And so that was kind of the idea of the first episode, was to look at who was Custer, what was going on in his background, what brought him up to the point of becoming a major general during the Civil War as a field commissioned officer, and then what brought him, because, he was field commissioned, so after the war was over, he got bumped back down to whatever original rank he was, and then he kind of climbed back up to a lieutenant colonel, leading into the Indian Plains Wars in the 1870s. The second episode, we looked at Sitting Bull, or at the time when he was young growing up, Sitting Bull was known as slow. He wasn't your typical Lakota fighter. He wasn't like, I kind of portrayed the Lakota in the second episode as almost like the Plains version of the Spartans. These people knew how to fight. They knew how to use multiple different types of weapons. They studied all the different modes of attack, and they were incredibly aggressive. They were, for the lack of better words, like, you just didn't want to mess with these people. And so we looked at that time, his name was Slow, and he became known as Sitting Bull. But there was one confrontation where Sitting Bull basically got caught stealing a bunch of horses from the Crow, which was a neighboring tribe, who unto themselves, they were no slouches either. Like, these people knew what they were doing. But I focused on a confrontation where Sitting Bull basically challenged the Crow chief to a duel, and by being patient, by waiting, by observing, he was able to defeat this Crow chief and basically get away with all these horses that he stole and all that. But he kind of cemented himself as this guy who just didn't willy-nilly go and charge and attack everything that moved. This guy would study, he would analyze, he would look for patterns. And that's exactly what he did during the American Civil War. Is Sitting Bull basically watched how the Union Army fought and how they handled things on a day-to-day basis. He studied the routines. And then on top of that, he was also reaching out to a lot of other reservations, like the, what was it? It was the, oh my goodness, Arapaho,
I'm sorry, I'm no help.
I know, I'm useless. Well, anyways, he was reaching out to a lot of other tribes that were forced into reservations. He was like, hey guys, come join us. come hang out with us. There's going to be a fight. There's going to be a fight with the Americans here coming soon. We might as well join up. And that's what he did. He absorbed Arapaho tribe. There we go. The Hunkpapa, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. He basically joined everybody up in the 1860s and the early 1870s. And where most of these tribes would have like a couple hundred fighting men, when he joined them all up, it was now like a cluster of 10 to 15,000 men, women, and children, with like over 2,000 or potentially over 2,000 highly trained, skilled warriors to take on whatever force was coming at them. And that was exactly what Sitting Bull's plan was. And so where we kind of left off in the last episode, in the beginning months of summer, there was known as the Sundance ceremony, right? This is like June, like late May, early June. Sitting Bull was attending the Sundance ceremony by the Rosebud Creek, which we're going to dive into that here a little bit. But he had a vision during this ceremony where he envisioned soldiers in blue just raining like grasshoppers coming everywhere at them.
Okay.
And he envisioned where like they were all defeated. And so he took that as an opportunity. And there's actually a lot of teepee paintings. There's a lot of drawings. There was a lot of information out there that kind of showed what his vision was. And it was really the catalyst for basically this gigantic city of Native Americans. We're preparing to just tee up on the Americans if they decided to show up.
Okay.
And so during that whole ceremony, there were some Crow Scouts that kind of saw this go down. Like a few days after the ceremony, they ran off and they got in touch with an American general by the name of Crook. There was a colonel by the name of Gibbon. There was another general by the name of Terry, and there was also a new lieutenant colonel of the 7th Cavalry, George Armstrong Custer. These scouts reported to them like, hey, there's a massive group of people out there that had this vision. You might want to do something about it. And then this is where we are starting this episode off, is with the famous 3-pronged approach that didn't work at all. Whew.
Sorry, I was actually having a coughing attack.
I just needed a moment to catch my breath. I felt like I just dispensed of like a gigabyte of information in like 10 minutes.
You did. It was good.
So here we are. We are now in May and June of 1876. It was determined that the 3-pronged approach was going to be the best way for wiping out the Lakota, the Sioux, basically get rid of Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse and some other key people. Now, the 3-pronged approach was actually a very, very well thought out plan. We'll get into some of the issues with it in a little bit. And once you see these issues, it is glaring like, why didn't they think of this before? But this wasn't in an attack that they were just going to throw a bunch of men at and leave it as it was. In total, there was nearly 3,000 men allocated. So if you take up the divide the 3-pronged approach by, 3. You've got each column consisting of approximately 1,000 infantrymen or cavalry or troopers or whatever, right? Each group approximately had about 1,000.
Okay.
And the idea was that, okay, we've got a central enemy in the middle here. We're going to attack from 3 different sides. And yeah, we're going to take care of all this all at once. This is a very Union Army approach. We saw this in Fredericksburg. We saw this, there's Fredericksburg. We saw it in Antietam. We've seen it in Bull Run, Manassas, both 1 and 2, where the Union Army is like, okay, we're going to do the hammer and anvil approach. Right, we're going to have a smaller force attack from one side, which would drive the enemy down into a predicted area where they're going to walk into thousands of highly armed soldiers, and they're just going to walk into a wall of lead, right? For some odd reason, the Union always stuck with that approach, whereas you would look at, say, Lee's army, where he would divide his military up by like 2 or 3, and they would... The difference is like, yeah, they had smaller units, but they were faster, they would attack, but they were also highly coordinated, and it worked. Here, the Union Army or the Federal Army thought, all right, cool. Off to the west, we are going to have, off to the way left side, there's 3 forts here. There's one off to the left, there's one off to the right, one off to the south. So off to the west, Colonel John Gibbons took 6 companies of the 7th Infantry and 4 companies of the 2nd Cavalry and marched out of Fort Ellis. So this is kind of like, think Bozeman, Montana area, right? We're heading towards the Black Hills, which is in, what is it? That's in like, kind of like, I don't want to say the middle of Wyoming, but close enough, right? It's in that part of the country where there's a lot of grass.
Yep, lots of grass, some mountains.
Yep. And hills and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah, there's all that stuff out there, and there's a river.
Yeah, there's some water.
Yeah. That's nice. All... Yeah, I just narrowed down America in a nutshell.
Okay.
And so basically, a company is a little different today than what it is back then. Back then, think of a company as they would have letter designations like A company, B company, C company, and so on and so on. But generally speaking, each company consisted of 100 men. And then by today's standards, a company would then be divided up by platoons, of which there would be 20 to 30 men and so on and so on. Colonel John Gibbon took 6 companies, so there's 600 men of the 7th Infantry, and 4 companies of the 2nd Cavalry, so these were horse-mounted people. So we're talking about 1,000 men in general. That's a sizable force. That's already that is equivalent to what the Lakota had just in fighting numbers alone. And so they came out of Fort Ellis, which, basically Bozeman, Montana, and they went along the Yellowstone River. So if you were to look at the Lakota encampment, to the north of them was the Yellowstone River. So basically, Gibbon took a huge force out from the west, followed north of the Yellowstone River, and the idea was to kind of scout out, see what was going on, try to identify the enemy encampment, and just do, military stuff. Yeah. Shoot things and
march.
March and kill people and get dysentery and
that's good.
And all that. Yeah, because, the 1800s of it all.
Right. I mean, it coincides with our Oregon Trail track.
Yeah, this is like right in the middle of all that. Yeah. So
it makes sense.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people with a lot of diarrhea.
Yeah.
And marching.
Imagine the smell. Anyway.
So then on May 25th, or not 25th, 29th, Brigadier General George Crook. So this was the general that he was kind of in charge of this whole thing. He was the senior officer. On May 29th, Brigadier General George Crook took 10 companies. So right out, he's got like half the alphabet coming with him in terms of companies of the 3rd Cavalry. So we're talking 1,000 horse-powered soldiers, I guess. Like, these were all horse-mounted folks. So again, these weren't people you wanted to mess with. 5 companies of the 2nd Cavalry and 2 companies of the 4th Infantry out of Fort Fetterman in Wyoming. Now we're kind of down in southern Wyoming. Think of kind of like the Cheyenne area. This was the biggest force. This was going to be the force that would be the anvil, whereas Gibbons and Terry/Custer would be the hammers. The idea was that they would kind of converge from the east and the west and push everybody down south into Crook's forces, which would be just overwhelming firepower. They couldn't retreat. They couldn't do anything. And then to the east, out of the newly named Abraham Lincoln Fort, there was, so on May 17th, Brigadier General Alfred Terry's column, including 12 companies of the 7th Cavalry, all of which were, so all 12 companies were under the command of Lieutenant Colonel George Custer.
Okay.
We're talking 1,200 men. He didn't quite have that many in terms of at the last stand, which we'll kind of get into in a little bit. But he also had 2 companies of the 17th Infantry. Oh, and the Gatling gun detachment of the 20th Infantry.
Okay.
These were your machine gunners. And I couldn't find an exact number of what they had in terms of Gatling guns. I read some reports saying that it was 2 Gatling guns, and I've also read some that were like excess of 4 to 5 Gatling guns. Either way, Gatling guns were devastating weaponry at that time. They could fire 350 rounds a minute, assuming they worked. There's a large debate in terms of if these guns were employed with Custer, because he was given the option of taking these guns with him, and Custer turned it down, and he kind of had some good reasons for doing it. But, you know, who's to say, like, man, if he had access to frickin' machine guns during this conflict, could he have made it out?
I mean, they can't hit emus, so I could see where he's coming from. Just saying.
Fair enough. And if you were to look at how the emus fought their war, I don't mean this in an insulting way to the Native Americans, but the way that Native Americans fought, it was very different than what the Federal Army was used to.
Fair.
It was very fluid. It was the Native Americans would attack to create the most amount of chaos possible and to cut off any sort of communication between the companies and the leadership and whatnot. The jury's still out. Could these Gatling guns played a major part? Maybe not. It's really, really tough to tell, and we'll explore that here, you know, at the end of it when we kind of like pick apart what really happened. General Alfred Terry, he headed out. He basically kept a lot of the infantry. He kept the Gatling gun stuff. He kept the 17th Infantry stuff. Like, he kept the boots on the ground stuff, whereas Custer kind of had separate orders. Because Custer's in charge of the cavalry here, the idea would be like, hey bro, I'm gonna kind of hang out here. I'm gonna kind of set things up on our side, and a lot of this is kind of fishy depending on the approach that you want to look at this, because I think Terry was more of a Ulysses Grant fan than Grant was a fan of Custer.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Kinda.
There's, like, if you listen to the first episode, there was a lot of instances where Custer was openly defiant against Ulysses S. Grant, who was the president at the time. Mm-hmm. Like, there was a lot of cases where Custer just kind of, like, gave his president the middle finger and got away with it. And so there's a part of me that thinks that Grant ain't stupid. Grant didn't take over the Army of the Potomac because he was a good tactician. He took it over and he succeeded because he knew how the politics worked of being a general.
Yeah, I could see that.
And so there's a part of me, kind of like Eisenhower, right? Eisenhower wasn't this brilliant tactician. Eisenhower knew how to play the game of officership in the military, and he knew how to play it internationally, and that's what worked out to his advantage. And so there's a little part of me that I would love to go back, talk to Grant on his deathbed, and be like, hey bro, did you set up Custer? And I would be really curious to hear his response, because when you really look at what happened here, there are some things that were kind of sketchy that took place right before all this whole thing went down. Let's take a quick look at the 7th Cavalry at the time. So the 7th Cavalry, or the 7th Cav, was and is still a very, very famous military unit. It has a long history. Probably the second most famous case of the 7th Cavalry is when there was a battalion of the 7th Cavalry that was surrounded and outnumbered in Vietnam in the Ia Drang battle in 1965. So this is, if you've ever seen the movie We Were Soldiers or read the book by, at that time, well, he was Major General Hal Moore. It's the cavalry, the 7th Cavalry has a lot of history, kind of like the 101st Airborne or the Easy Company that we see so much of in like Band of Brothers and whatnot. So the 7th Cavalry was formed shortly after the American Civil War, and this unit was designed to be highly trained and extremely equipped, like repeating rifles, access to the machine guns. They carried a lot more ammunition, more food rations. These guys were kind of sent out to the Plains Wars as like the equivalent to like the American Delta Force or the Rangers today.
Okay.
And so like 7th Cavalry was kind of set up that way. And it was also highly manned. I mean, it was basically a company had 100 men in it, and on all intents and purposes, Custer should have set out from Fort Abraham Lincoln with 1,200 men in his cavalry. He didn't have anywhere close to that. So yeah, for 10 years following the American Civil War, the 7th Cavalry was a pinnacle of the military could produce. By the time 1876 rolled around, the 7th Cavalry was not up to spec, so to speak. For example, out of the 45 officers and the 718 men assigned to the regiment, 14 officers, including the regimental commander, Samuel D. Sturgis. So Sturgis was the actual real commander, but Sturgis had to do like a recruiting duty or something like that in Kansas, or like he had to be pulled away to do some obligatory military stuff. And so he left his whole entire command to Custer.
Okay.
So yeah, like the actual leader wasn't there during this whole conflict. 45 officers, 14 officers, including the original command, they were reassigned temporarily. And this happened very shortly before this conflict even started. And then another 152 men were stuck in the cavalry depot in St. Louis, Missouri. When it was all said and done, like Custer was left with 12 companies of 521, and that included the officers. So if you think about it, what's 521 divided by 12?
Oh, you're asking me to do math at 9 p.m. at night. But 521 divided by what?
I don't know, some number.
Hey. What is it?
Hang on here.
12?
521 divided by 12.
43.416 with a little line over the 6.
Yeah, 6 repeating. So he basically had each company on average was supposed to have 100 men in it. Each company minus officers that were pulled out at the last minute. Each company was sitting at 43 and a half men.
Yikes.
It gets worse from here. So on top of being understaffed and undermanned, almost half of Custer's men at this time, so now we're talking like 200 of his men, were brand new. These were dudes that are just like fresh out of school, not even West Point, not even out of basic training. These were people who graduated elementary school at the age of 15, 16, and they're like, I want to do something with my life. I want to go out to the plains and fight the Indians. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could die.
You could get annihilated and get scalped and...
God.
Yeah, I mean, if you look past all that, it's not so bad.
The dying thing.
Like the whole dying and being scalped apart thing, like it's not that bad. It's right. Maybe you can walk away with some cool stories. Half of his men were like brand new, and all this happened shortly before this conflict. Like this all happened, I think it was in like the beginning or the middle of May, where he lost a huge portion of his men. He lost a huge chunk of his officers, his trained officers, and then he gets a whole bunch of new recruits that barely know how to even load a rifle. Can you see where I'm coming from here? Like,
yeah, kind of given some bad resources. Not bad, but
it was stacked up against him.
Yeah, there you go.
He was kind of set up to fail.
Right.
So when you left Fort Abraham Lincoln and started heading towards the Black Hills, I mean, you still got like 4 or 5 days marching ahead of you. And so a lot of these guys, they had bouts of cholera because, you know, the 1800s of it all.
Seems to be a theme.
Thankfully they didn't have to ford too many rivers where they've got washed away and all that stuff. They had some aggressive streams.
Some broken yokes. You know.
Yeah. So So yeah, these troopers were underfed, exhausted from long rides, sick from bouts of cholera and other diseases, and they were kind of dealing with injury and whatnot. And so yeah, on paper, the 7th Cavalry was impressive, especially with that Gatling gun detachment, which, again, we'll discuss this shortly, but by the 7th Cavalry reached the Sioux encampment, yeah, they were kind of short in every metric to be successful. In fact, to be honest with you, for as long as they lasted, it was impressive in its own right.
Jeez.
Which was only like 2 hours. So we now have the dumpster fires within dumpster fires, right? This is dumpsterception here.
Dumpster fireception.
On June 17th, 1876, things started to fall apart with the so-called three-pronged approach. The main issue was that the timing was extremely crucial and communication was non-existent given the circumstances. Yeah, everybody was spread out. We're talking miles and miles and miles where you have no visual communication, you don't even have the capability of sending out a writer. Like, basically, Gibbons, Crook, Terry, Custer, like, they met up before they were going to execute this plan, and they're like, all right, we're all going to meet up at this point in the map on this day. Cool. But there was no way of orchestrating that. There was no lines of communication. And this is where things kind of fell apart. So, the first main kerfuffle took place at the Battle of Rosebud River with Crook's column. So keep in mind, Crook was supposed to come up from the south. He was going to follow the Rosebud River. So you've got the Yellowstone River to the north. I'm like pointing at my screen as though like people can actually see.
I mean,
what the heck I'm talking about.
They can.
Yeah.
So everybody take out your maps.
Yeah. Everybody just bring up a map of Custer's Last Stand and you'll know what I'm talking about.
There you go.
Maybe if I put something in the show notes, that may help too.
I was just going to say, maybe we can add it in the show notes and that'll help out.
Yeah, I'll work on that. 12 episodes in and I don't think I've actually uploaded anything, so I may need to backtrack and put some stuff in. So
we'll figure ourselves out. Anyway.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen? Yeah. So basically, Crook was supposed to be the final part of the fight, not the first part of the fight. Crook was supposed to come up from the Rosebud, and by the time he went up the Rosebud and approached where he thought the Lakota Sioux encampment was, he was fully expecting there to be like a huge retreat from the Indian forces. Like, oh my gosh, we're overwhelmed, we're running down south. And the idea was they would plow right into Crook. Well, here's the problem. And you can probably see in my notes here where I have all...
in capital letters.
No one knew where the Sioux encampment was.
So, like, they were just walking around aimlessly?
Well, I wouldn't say they were walking around aimlessly. They were all heading in a direction to where they thought the encampment was going to be. But yeah, ultimately, they had no idea. They had no idea where this encampment was. They knew it was somewhere out there in the grassy fields. It's over there by that river. Right. There are some hills.
Sure.
There's some grass. I mean, if you think about it, like the Crow Scouts, they reported back what they knew. It's not like hey dude, I brought up Google Maps and I have a little pin here that says this is where you need to go. Let me share this with you guys. So yeah, pull out your smartphones. I'll share the address with you guys, and then let's try to work out the most efficient routes, including traffic and whatnot. And there was none of that. It was like, hey dudes, there's a massive gathering in the Black Hills, and it's out there in a grassy field with no real identifying markers. And
I mean, I get the 1800s of it all, but it just sounds like part of a plot for a Mel Brooks movie. You know, it has some Blazing Saddle vibes.
It does.
It's just kind of funny.
Yeah, Blazing Saddles mixed with like History of the World Part 1.
Yeah.
With a smattering of like Hitler on Ice. Yeah.
Oh God. No, that's next episode.
yeah, we're getting there. Yeah, like this is the thing that blew me away is nobody knew where this encampment was, and they were all supposed to converge on this encampment at the same time, and everybody was completely blind. And then if you factor in, okay, if you don't know where this encampment was, then nobody knew the size of the force that they were going to be attacking. Think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I have no idea where I'm supposed to be attacking these people, and if I don't know that, then I have no idea how massive of a force it is I'm attacking.
And how are you going to do any kind of maneuver without being able to see what you're maneuvering?
Exactly. Like you can start to see like the dumpster fire within dumpster fires here. And the Battle of this Rosebud River is this could be an episode in its own right. But I'm just gonna kind of plow through it. So long story short, when we look at the Battle of Rosebud, this took place about a week or so prior to what became known as Custer's Last Stand. The was kind of confusing, and what the Americans didn't understand is that Sitting Bull had been absorbing tribe after tribe after tribe for like the past 10-15 years. Many smaller nations opted to leave their reservations, so the government said, hey, if you're an Indian, you have to live here. But a lot of people just upped and left, and they didn't notify the Census Bureau. They didn't say, hey, we're picking up and leaving. They just kind of secretly walked out and joined up with Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. The original projected force of the Lakota was 700 to 800 warriors. In all reality, it was more like 1,800 and possibly even over 2,500 warriors. And yeah, they had no idea. The Americans had no idea what it was they were getting into.
Yeah, that sucks.
I made a note here. Match plus gasoline plus dumpster full of flammable trash all combined here. Crook's column also had some other tribes with him, right? Crook was a big fan of pitting tribe against tribe, and this is something that America does to this day. Enemy of an enemy is like our friend kind of a thing. And so yeah, he would purposely kind of stoke hostilities between tribes against a bigger tribe, like, say, the Lakota. And then these guys or these tribes would be more inclined to join Crook and his force and make things easier on him with manpower. And Crook would send these guys out in advance as basically cannon fodder. But it's kind of a douchery move, but I can see where he's coming from to an extent. Yeah, okay, so basically put, the Crow were a huge attachment to Crook's forces. And so on June 17th, 1876, at 8 o'clock in the morning, Crook stopped the column to rest his men. And he sent the Crow to go scouting ahead for, well, anybody. And the issue was that the Crow, when they were with the federal troopers, they would just kind of ride off and do their own thing. If they saw some buffalo off in the distance, they would ride off and go shoot them. They really didn't adhere to like concepts of anonymity. They didn't like, hey, let's not disclose our position. They didn't honestly care. They just went out and did their own thing. So by the time June 17th rolled around, Crook's column had to stop. I mean, they had been marching for days on end. They had to stop, take a break. And so he sent the Crow out, and then all of a sudden they started hearing gunfire by about 8:30.
Okay.
Like, okay, well, they're probably just shooting more buffalo. So we are just south the Lakota encampment. So they were all just kind of hanging out. Then after a couple of minutes, they noticed that the gunfire was getting more and more heated. It was ramping up. Pace upon which the firing was taking place was growing. And that's when Crook understood, oh, there's something out there. And then right around 8:30 in the morning, so keep in mind, we're talking 30 minutes here, two Crows came running over the hill, and they were shouting, Lakota, Lakota, like, we've engaged the enemy. We found the enemy, and they're out there, and they're pissed. And so the fight was on, and the ensuing battle lasted for over 6 hours, and it was a wild fight. And what Crook did is he set up his companies in a perimeter, so he didn't divide them up and try to counterattack or whatever. He played strictly a defensive front, hoping that eventually Gibbon, Terry, and Custer would force everybody else down and into his column, but that never happened. Instead, Crook's whole company, his whole column, was engaged with hundreds and hundreds of Lakota, and it kind of turned into a stalemate. basically put the he set up a perimeter on top of a hill, and basically the Lakota would try attacking, and they would walk into a wall of firepower, and then they would get pushed back. But conversely, Crooks's men, yeah, sure, they were in a really, really good defensive high ground, but they were not in a position to chase after the Lakota.
Okay.
So even though they were being attacked, they couldn't counterattack. And if they couldn't counterattack, they couldn't actually see where the actual encampment was. The reason why Crook didn't meet absolute destruction was because he had overwhelming numbers, fair enough, and he was able to prevent the Lakota from engaging up close and cut off communications to other companies. This would be a crucial concept later on. In other words, he kept everybody close together into a single fighting force. Yeah, they were surrounded and they were being attacked, but it wasn't enough to overrun him. Ultimately, Crook won the day, right? Fair enough, but it came at a terrible cost. His column sustained heavy casualties and lost a fair amount of horses, so any attempt to a counterattack was lost. From here on out, all Crook could do was just do a defensive fight.
Okay. So they won, but they were in really bad shape.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say they were in really, really bad shape. They just couldn't do anything else other than hunker down and take on a defensive position, which...
Okay. So,
yeah.
In chess, you just have to protect your king or your SOL.
Exactly, yeah, and which you can still inflict an unbelievable amount of damage, but you're just not able to go on to the counteroffensive as much as Crook would have liked to have been able to do.
Okay.
So the battle was so intense and violent that Crook was not aware of how many Lakota forces lay hidden in the plains. If he sent out any messengers to Gibbons or Terry Custer's columns, those messengers would be caught, killed, or worse yet, divulge information of where Crook's position was, and thus jeopardize everything. So, again, a reoccurring theme here, nobody could communicate with each other. And so Crook finally had an idea at the end of all this of the basic location of the Lakota encampment. But everybody was flying blind, so to speak, until Crook's involvement. And there was no way to communicate what Crook had seen. He couldn't tell anybody, holy cow, there's a lot more going on here than what our intel originally reported. With Crook's column to the south effectively useless, the task now fell on Gibbons' column to the west and Terry Custer column to the east. The issue is that neither column knew what had happened to Crook. Let's not forget that all three columns were supposed to converge on one undesignated target at the same undesignated time with no intel as to where anybody was.
That's foolproof.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's going to work every time. That's like trying to plan something with, a group of friends. It's like trying to plan a D&D campaign, and then you're telling everybody to come whenever they want.
Yeah.
We don't really know where it's going to be at, but just bring your stuff anyway. And as far as where we are in the campaign, you'll find out.
Yeah, it's basically like, hey, let's set up a D&D match in the weekend in May at the McDonald's.
On a leap year.
Yeah. That'd even make it more specific.
Right.
But this is literally what they had to go off of. Yeah, after the Battle of Rosebud River, Crook decided to retreat back south and regroup and reorganize. Again, Gibbons, Terry, and Custer were all still under the assumption that there was going to be this mega force to the south that they could rely on. Custer's dumpster fire. Meanwhile, shortly after June 17, Terry gave specific orders to Custer to head southwest and scout out the enemy position, and if sufficient information was provided, then he was given permission to engage as he saw fit. So Custer was basically given complete autonomy here, hey, scout out the enemy position, but if you see yourself in an opportunity where you could inflict a lot of damage or even win the day, then break orders, do what you got to do. This is a very, very unique thing about American military leadership, is that if you looked at, say, in World War II, you look at the Japanese Empire, you did what your commanding officer did or said for you to do. And if that meant you taking your own life for whatever reason, that's exactly what you did. But the American side of things is a little different in that and it still is this way today, where, okay, go out here, secure this point, take this location, do what we got to do. But if something happens, if something goes sideways, if something happens that is unforeseeable to you and I, then do what you need to do to win the day or stay alive or whatever. And so, like, when we look at after the Civil War, going into like World War One, World War Two, and Vietnam, and all that, and Korea, and Desert Storm, we'll see that time and time again where officers are kind of given, I don't want to say complete autonomy, but hey, if you need to make a decision with the information that you have, we're going to assume that information that you have is more accurate than what your commanding officer has back at base, and you do what you got to do.
Okay.
And so yeah, that's what Custer was given. Custer was given the use of the Gatling guns, but he declined. And he said that, well, they would slow him down. Because it's true, like, each Gatling gun required 4 horses. It required a huge detachment of people to operate these things. They took forever to set up. I could see where Custer was coming from. And so what Custer did is you know how we had the 3-pronged approach? Custer kind of did that, but with his own battalion, right? He wanted to divide up his battalion of 500 some odd men and divide that up into 3. Now we're talking each company here was only, 160 men in strength?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, he was he was dividing up his battalion into realistically what would be 3 companies, but by today's standards. Yeah, this probably wasn't the best way to approach things. So here's how he divided it up. 3 companies were given to Marcus Reno. Now, keep in mind, 3 companies, he was probably given like 150, 200 men tops. And Marcus Reno, was to proceed west and attack the Lakota encampment. So just run straight in. Another 3 companies, so now we're talking like another 100, 150 men, were left to Captain Frederick Benteen to stay put as reinforcements and to supply aid to either Reno and Custer as needed. This is sound strategy. There's nothing wrong with this. The remaining 5 companies, so this was supposed to be the largest fighting force, was left with Custer. And there was a small detachment under the command of Thomas Benteen to handle the pack animals and ammunition and whatnot. They were
the logistics.
These were your truck drivers. These were the guys that kind of hung around. But as you can see, when you divide your battalion of 566 men by 3, like, you are really reducing the amount of firepower that you have. And he divided up his 3 groups with a lot of terrain in between all 3. So it would be really, really easy to cut them off.
Yeah.
Custer sent out more scouts to locate the Lakota encampment. A trusted scout under Custer's command named Mitch Boyer, who found the encampment and reported. So he's been out there for a while. He's actually been living with the Native Americans for years. Boyer returned and said, "General, I have been with these Indians for 30 years, and this is the largest village I have ever heard of." So this is the first guy that actually got witness of this camp. And, he kind of like, I could just envision him kind of like screwing up over this hill looking over, and then just seeing this city of teepees and warriors and men and women, and it just, holy crap. So yeah, at this point, Custer was worried that the Indians would break up. Keep in mind, his main objective was to basically exterminate hostilities or hostiles. So if it meant shooting women and children, then so be it. The idea, what Custer was worried that if this encampment got downwind of the amount of American forces that were coming in, then they would immediately split up, and then it's going to be like guerrilla warfare.
Okay.
That would have been a dumpster fire in his own right. So Custer had to act fast. He felt like, I have to attack ASAP, otherwise we're going to lose everything. At this time, no one knew just how large the encampment was. Early reports indicated that Sitting Bull had left his reservation with only 800 people in total. The reports left out of the fact that numerous other tribes had left their reservations and joined forces with the Lakota. So this was like a Native American metropolis here. This is where Custer is going to get absolutely wrecked. Custer sent Reno and his 3 companies to the south and then west to attack the Lakota encampment. The idea was that hopefully Reno would meet up maybe with Crooks's division and all that kind of stuff. Well, by this time, Crook had already retreated way to the south, and Reno was left to his own devices. It was Reno's men who actually got first sight of the encampment. They went charging up to this encampment. They crested this hill, and they're like, "Oh crap! We are way in over our head." So yeah, Reno charged from the south. Quickly discovered that he was way in over his head. He quickly saw that the Lakota encampment wasn't just 800 strong, but maybe 10,000. And it included over 1,000 to 2,000 fighters. So once Reno got sight of this, he kind of changed his tactics a little bit.
Yeah, as he would.
Yeah, I would have just hightailed it out.
Same. I would have ran.
I would have gotten out of there. I would not have formed a defensive line in the middle of a field. I would have immediately retreated to where there was cover. And that's exactly eventually what Reno did. But this guy, I don't know. Reno's a complicated person. Some argue that he made some really, really bad decisions and that he was an incompetent. But then there was also a lot of factors in terms of yeah, he has 100 plus men and he's being attacked by 800 to 1,000 warriors. His translator just got shot in the face, and he was covered in the blood of his translator. I don't think I could have kept my resolve.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah. I would have dipped. Sorry,
yeah,
I'm gone.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm gonna take up
basket weaving.
I'm gonna go into education. I'm done with the military.
I'm gonna go teach.
Yeah.
Happy Teachers Appreciation Week.
Yeah. Yep. Reno decided to hold back and set up a defensive line as there was an onslaught of Lakota warriors charging after them. Reno tried to hold off the attack for as long as he could, but ultimately fell back to higher ground and more coverage. So this guy, the issue is that your cavalry would have to dismount, set up lines. That takes time. 1 in 4 men had to remain in the back and basically hold the horse's reins. Basically, he lost 25% of his fighting force just in the process of dismounting and fighting. Whereas if he kept his men on the horses, then they could be a lot more fluid. They could go a lot further. So that was kind of one area that he got beat up on.
Okay.
Yeah, he had to retreat. He retreated around the Rosebud, knowing that he stirred up the hornet's nest. And even though he was kind of in some wooded areas, yeah, he was screwed. And eventually Reno gave his last command to what was left of his men. And he said, "Those who wish to survive, follow me," and promptly got the hell out of there. They were pursued. The issue was that they were pursued and they were picked off one by one. Anybody who stopped to help a fallen trooper, they were killed. Or they would watch their fellow die and then take an arrow to the forehead. And it was a disaster. It was an absolute routing. So out of the 200 plus men who were involved with Reno's charge, only a couple dozen made it out alive.
Okay.
That is horrific. And actually, when I look back at the numbers, he didn't have 200 plus men. I think he had about 150. So either way.
I mean, yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, when you only come out with a couple dozen survivors, that's a bad deal. So they scrambled out of there. They went north, and they met up with Captain Frederick Bentine's reinforcements. And then Bentine and now Reno, they had to fight for their lives too. They had to fight off a huge, massive attack. At the same time, Custer was to the west and a little to the north, and they were under attack as well. So, Custer, on the other hand, was not expecting to take on the entire Lakota force. There was a theory that his main objective was to overrun the women and children in hopes of disparaging the Lakota to continue or to to cease to continue hostilities. In other words, he wanted to hold the women and children as hostages, which was kind of messed up. I mean, I guess you got to do whatever you got to do, but still messed up.
That's a little messed up. Yeah, that's take innocence. That's cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I can kind of see the tactics of it, but ethically, it's like, really, is that how you want to fight this? But
this feels like a war crime.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, so like, what determines a war crime at this time?
That's true.
So now we come across the famous lone teepee. So the lone teepee, as Custer was marching out with his 4 or 5 companies, he came across a lone teepee where there was a fallen warrior in there, and this warrior was old she-bear who had died from injuries after the Battle of Rosebud a few days earlier. So here, Custer is now in contact with a remnant of what happened with Crooks's engagement. This really spurred Custer, like, shoot, I have to react really fast, which, again, I can see where he's coming from. Discovery was the ultimate beginning of the end. Custer sent what messages he could to Reno to press the attack prior to Reno seeing firsthand just what the Lakota encampment comprised of. So he's like, attack, attack, attack. And then he also reached out to Benteen. And he's like, for the love of God, bring all the reinforcements. Do everything you can. Not knowing that Reno had already been annihilated and that Benteen and Reno's men were pinned down and they were fighting for their own lives. Benteen is like, I can't send anybody out. And Custer was, at this whole entire time, was fully expecting that he was expecting to get reinforcements that would never come. To the east, Benteen had no desire to move to reinforce Custer, probably because he was under attack. The south and southwest, the remnants of the Reno battalion, or the companies, I should say, was retreating to Benteen's location. Meanwhile, Custer took his 5 companies to the north, but just south of the Yellowstone River. So that's where Gibbon was north of the Yellowstone River. Custer was just south of it. Oh, and so he missed the reinforcements from Gibbons. It's like, holy crap, dude. If you had just crossed the river to the north and just waited maybe like 10 hours or so, 1, you could have defended that, and 2, you would have now had access to like 1,000+ men.
Yeah.
And from here, Custer was screwed.
Yeah, it's fortunate.
Benteen never reinforced Custer. Benteen decided to stay back and defend themselves with the remaining members of Reno's column and play a defensive game. This decision has been part of contention for many generations. Some said that Benteen did the right thing. Many argued that he was kind of a douche. Yeah, again, it's a complicated situation where it's like, man, could he have helped out Custer? Maybe, but at what expense?
Right.
And so Custer essentially charged headfirst into the entire Lakota encampment. Yes, there was a huge force that was attacking the Benteen column, but Custer basically charged right into the main fighting force. And so Custer kind of had about 250-ish men, if even that. I think it was probably less than that. I think it was more closer to like 200 men tops. And he charged right into a force of easily 700-800 warriors.
Yeah.
And from here, the Lakota had learned from Crooks and Reno's attacks to straight up engage and attack at point blank range. In other words, the idea is, and this is a Sitting Bull tactic, like, you cannot get into a fight with the Americans and play the long shot game. You can't, you will not be able to outfire the American military by engaging from a large distance. You have to engage them by a strategy called grabbing them by the belt. And the idea is to just intermix with the companies, cut everybody off, and make it so that it's virtually impossible to communicate with anybody, and it's just pure chaos.
I mean, yeah, that's smart.
So you can already see, if you look at Crooks's standpoint, like, you know how he took up a defensive position, he encircled his companies, basically created his own little fort. What Custer did was he split everybody up. They were too far apart. Nobody could help each other. Nobody could communicate with each other. It was Custer and, like 200 men versus, 700-800 Native Americans. Ultimately, Custer, he retreated to a hill, which became, ironically, Custer's Hill, or as we now know it as Last Stand Hill.
Hey, did he die on that hill?
Yeah. But you know what would be really ironic? If he, retreated and there was a sign that was planted there sometime before saying Last Stand Hill. Wouldn't you be thinking that, wow, that's ironic?
I would want to think of, some strongly felt opinion that I had if I knew those were my last moments. Just to say that I died on the hill.
Yeah, if I'm retreating to a hill and it's called Last Stand Hill or Custer's Hill, I think that's God saying something.
Maybe I should rethink this.
Yeah, I made some bad choices leading up to this moment, but I mean, in all fairness, it's going to be over here in a couple of minutes. So one thing to point out, and this is reason why I delayed recording yesterday, is because I saw a really interesting documentary where basically these amateur historians, they went out with all their metal detectors and they started tracking bullet casings. And they drew some really interesting conclusions. And one of them was that the remaining 50 to 75 remaining of his men held their ground against hundreds of attacking surrounding Lakota. And they found shell casings everywhere on this hill. And some reports from the surviving Lakota acknowledge that the last fight was the most perilous of them all. The remaining troopers formed a skirmish line and fought extensively to maintain survival. Many of the Lakota Sioux reported that this final stage was the most violent and costly part of the attack. The 50-60 troopers formed a dense and efficient skirmish line that was able to pick off a lot of the attacking Native forces. According to archaeological digs, it was discovered that the only thing that did Custer and his men in was crazy horses we can't just keep surrounding and shooting, and crazy horses attack them straight on, just run them over, and that's ultimately what killed everybody. Yeah, that last part, and I got to give respect to the surviving on the Native American side. This was we easily kicked their butts, but this last 50 to 60 men, they knew what they were doing, and they made us pay a heavy price for this victory. And I always thought that was kind of interesting. So something that was discovered in this documentary, and I'll have to link it in the show notes, is that there was actually a company that broke free from the Benteen Reno group. I think it was 50, 60 men, and they were like, okay, hey, we see an opportunity, let's go out here and rescue this. But they rode off into the distance when they broke free, and all they could see was a bunch of smoke over in this hill, or what's known as the Deep Ravine. Basically, they're like, well, that's Custer. He's gone.
Huh.
And so, yeah, the theory is that this company, they were the last ones to actually see what would have been of Custer's last stand. The aftermath. All right, we're going a little long here, but I got this. I can knock this up really fast.
Here we go.
On June 27th, so the day after Custer got annihilated, a large portion of the Reno and Benteen group to the east now faced a brunt of the remaining Lakota Sioux attackers. The fight would last till 9 p.m. in a draw. Sounded like Benteen had a lot of stuff to go off of. He definitely held off the attacking Lakota. This is supposed to be a full routing, and Benteen held his ground. In a lot of cases, Benteen would be considered a hero for staving off the Lakota attacks for quite a long time, and was even distinguished for his actions, even though he kind of received a lot of criticism for not helping out Custer if he was given the ability to do so. For the most part, however, this was considered Lakota's last stand because America was pissed. So it actually took a week. It wasn't until July, after the 4th of July, that word got out of this absolute disaster of a fight. And it was portrayed that the Native Americans were savage, beastly, inhuman. Yeah, it was they were just absolute savages. when in reality, they just outmaneuvered and out-thought out the three-pronged approach that was feasibly impossible to begin with. Oh, and this is all due to legislation that America put together to forcibly remove the Lakota from an area that they legally had the rights to be in.
So it was America's fault.
So, it's like America.
Yeah.
After this, after June 27th, Sitting Bull quickly deduced that they could not hang out any longer at Greasy Grass because the Americans were going to return, and they were going to return in force. And this is exactly what happened. So even though 7th Cavalry took a huge beating, Congress and the Army decided to reinforce and bolster the 7th Cavalry, as well as Crook's companies and Terry's. The combined force with, now, keep in mind, they originally started off with about 3,000 men. When word got to Congress, when word got to the Army, it was like, nope, we are not holding back. And they just injected like 4,000 men into this campaign and to go after the Lakota Trail toward the Little Missouri River. This is where, like, Sitting Bull, he actually ran off to Canada. On top of that, the 44th Congress and the Democratic-controlled party, by the way, at this time, the Democrats are actually today's Republicans.
Yep. Party ideologies flipped somewhere around World War II-ish.
Yeah, no, like the Democrats were Republicans, and the Republicans, like Abraham Lincoln, was more of a Democrat than anything. This is something that modern day people who are alt-left and alt-right don't understand. Like, I saw one congressional hearing where a Republican wanted Congress to ban the Democratic Party for their involvement of maintaining slavery during the Civil War. And it was hilarious because it was like, yeah, but you do understand that the Democrats were the Republicans back then. The Democrats were the conservatives.
Correct.
Yeah. And
I don't know.
I don't know. Anybody who's ever read a history book would know that, but it's amazing at how few people actually know
or understand that idea.
It's
not even an idea, that event.
Yeah, it's a fact. And I love it because you see it all the time on social media where people are so heavily polarized. You're like, guys, it's not what you think. And
party split.
Yeah, and both hardcore left and hardcore right, they make themselves sound so stupid when they don't understand history.
History is important.
So yeah, basically, I don't know, where was I? So, on top of that, the 44th Congress, the Democratic-controlled party, today's Republican Party, lifted the ban on the size of the Army and allowed the Army to utilize units of 2,500 men or more by August. Basically, it makes sense, right? If you have a company, you don't want any more than 100 men in there. If you have a battalion, you don't want any more than, say, 700 to 1,000. But here, they bumped that up. They bumped it so, hey, if you've got a battalion of 2,500 men, go for it. It's quite okay. And that was kind of an interesting thing because that's how governments get overthrown, is by allowing legislation like these checks and balances to go through. This, like, now you're putting a lot more power into the military. And so, yeah, it's a fascinating concept in its own right. To make matters worse for the Lakota Sioux, the federal government enacted the Sell or Starve Clause of the Appropriations Act of 1876. So the Appropriations Act of 1876 basically said, hey, Lakota, you've got like 3 months to pack up and move out. If not, then you're considered a hostile and it's war, which is exactly what happened. So they enacted the Sell or Starve, where they basically said, okay, Lakota, if you don't sell your land, air quotes, sell your land, then we're going to cut off all your resources, all your rations, and we will starve you. And you're also going to be permanently relocated into an Indian reservation where you will not be allowed to leave.
Yeah, it's basically a smaller version of the Trail of Tears in response to what happened.
Yeah. It's
the sad thing is I purposely used the word smaller version, meaning the Trail of Tears was a lot worse, but still bad.
Yeah, that's an episode in its own right.
I don't know if I want to touch that episode, but
I'll look into it.
Yeah, well, we'll see if we can do it. Actually, because it's fascinating. It is interesting.
It is. It's just like
it's a very touchy subject.
Well, and for me, how would you, as a politician, actively sign off and vote for something like that?
Andrew Jackson's a piece of poo.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, yeah, no, and it's just strange how are these people really the enemy? Like, I don't know. To me, it's just mind blowing. I would be a horrible politician back then because I would like to think that I'm not going to go to these means, but I feel like the pressure was so strong on these politicians that they had to side this violent way in order to maintain their own existence.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Sitting Bull basically retreated to Canada, but this wasn't the end of Sitting Bull. As I mentioned in the last episode, like Sitting Bull, he, in his later years, I mean, he got to tour Europe. He met the Queen of England. He
lived quite the life.
He did. He did die a pretty sad death. Like, basically, he was in his 60s and he was fighting for his life because, you know, his tribe was yet again under attack. And yeah, he was shot and killed. But before that, though, he got to see a thing or two. And I would have liked to have met this guy. I would have really liked to have gotten his take on things or his ideas on how we could have proceeded differently as a white person and a Native American. I don't know. I feel like if he had lived for another 20 years, he probably would have been something similar to like the Martin Luther King Native American side of things. Actually, no, he would have been more of a Malcolm X. But
still would have been interesting, yeah.
Yeah, either way, I really wish he would had stayed around a little longer. So, okay, let's run through how Custer messed up. And this is how we're gonna finish this off. These are kind of like the lessons that you take away from this whole incident. So,
all right, bullet point fires. Let's go.
Yeah, here we go. So many would argue that Custer made some critical errors from day one. Custer turned down the use of the Gatling guns at the start of his part of the campaign. Custer thought that the Gatling guns would slow him down, and for the most part, he was right. Each gun required 4 horses, and soldiers had to drag the guns by hand over obstacles. When the guns worked, they were devastating, but quite often they jammed up and caused other problems. The other thing, too, is they only shot straight forward. It's not like, you know, when you play Call of Duty or whatever, and you can strafe and you run side to side, spraying bullets everywhere. No, like, these things were like laser pointers. They just fired straight, and then you would have to, like, stop and then, like pick up the gun and reposition it and aim it again and then fire straight again. And to a horde of warriors and horses that are very fluid, moving all over the place, I don't know. I just don't see them being that effective. If they were set up in a way that you could strafe left and right, I feel like they would have been a lot more effective. So Custer believed that there was nothing that the 7th Cavalry couldn't handle. So he turned down extra units from the 2nd Cavalry. And Custer was like, no, I've been outnumbered before. I know how to handle this. This isn't a problem. And I have to applaud Custer's confidence in that regard. He didn't back down from a fight, and he wasn't afraid to put himself in the middle of the fight. He just grossly underestimated everything. The other major issue is that he divided his forces too much. Instead of maintaining one cohesive column like Crook did in the Battle of Rosebud, Custer split his forces up into 3, or actually more like 4 segments if you factor in the pack mules and everything. This enabled the Lakota Sioux to intertwine and cut off each company. Leaders could not communicate, and the Lakota brought the fight close to home. In other words, Lakota attacked the Federal soldiers so close that their long-range firearms were rendered useless. Artillery, if there was any available, was of no use. They couldn't use cannons or anything if they had access to it because the Lakota were attacking so close. They were mixed in with the Americans. And yeah, Americans have a thing where we don't like killing our own people. And so even if we had superior artillery and all that stuff, it wouldn't have worked because they were so closely engaged. Custer straight up didn't have enough intel. So neither did Crook, nor Gibbon, or Terry, or anybody else. There was no way that a 3-pronged approach was going to work when none of the parties understood where they were going to meet up and at what time. The other thing that Custer kind of messed up on is he tried taking on too much on his own. This is unrealistic. We're talking about a guy who during During the Civil War, withstood a full attack and repelled the might of Jeb Stuart in the Battle of Gettysburg and won many other critical conflicts and resulting in saving the Union Army. Custer was no idiot. Much of his ideas and strategies weren't what the popular media portrayed. He was making sound decisions. He wasn't delusional, but he was a little overconfident. He didn't have the intel, and I think he tried taking on too much. He was too ambitious with his approach. If he had kept his whole entire battalion together as a 566 fighting force, I think the outcome would have been drastically different. And as a result, an entire battalion, a very famous battalion, was lost. And that's the dumpster fire that is Custer's last stand.
So an interesting note to point out as you were reading through that is this happened about 40 years before the First World War, and this happened at about just when the Second Industrial Revolution started happening. So if this had happened, maybe even just, I don't remember the year the telegraph was invented, but not off the top at least, but it was invented in the Second Industrial Revolution. So I will say that if this had happened just maybe 10 to 20 years later, that's the word, 10 to 20 years later, it probably would have went a different way because of the technological advances, including machine guns and like submarines and the telegraph and things that would have made it a lot easier. So I was just kind of thinking about that.
In the 1840s, though.
Was it invented in the 1840s?
Yeah, developed 1830s and 1840s by Samuel Morse and other inventors. I think what the part that you're trying to get at is, yeah, they had the telegraph, but they had no way of setting up the lines.
Oh, that's what it is. Thank you.
Yeah, like the thing is that they all had to fly completely in the dark. You know what? I think another invention would have greatly improved things. What would have happened if all three columns had a synchronized pocket watch?
Huh. What that would have made a huge difference. Just knowing what time you needed to be there.
Exactly. Yeah, if they could set up a date and time and they could figure out how far they needed to move and this and that unto itself would have made a world of difference. And so I imagine that some officers probably had a pocket watch or whatever. But I mean, shoot, with no idea of where the Lakota were sitting in plain sight, there was just nothing they could do to synchronize this. And it's different than, say, like in the Civil War. Yeah, sure, you're like leading up to the Battle of Gettysburg. Yeah, you had Lee's forces that were marching north, and then you literally had the Union forces were heading down south to try to stop him from hitting Washington. Even though like his army was split up, he had a very, very closely regulated, and the North had the same thing. They had communications left and right of who was where doing what and when. And here there was none of that. It was all guesswork.
Yeah.
But I also agree too, like, hey, if this happened in the 1880s,
it would have been very different.
Yeah, the repeating rifle was a lot more reliable. They were using more of the brass cartridges type of thing. They could hold more rounds. I think also too, if this happened in the 1880s, even the use of handguns became a lot more reliable. Instead of using cap and ball revolvers, they would have had Colts and whatnot.
Yeah.
Could you imagine how different it would have been if they had a freaking airplane?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, the Second Industrial Revolution was such a big deal, especially going into World War I, because that's like one of the primary the primary themes of World War I is the meeting of the Second Industrial Revolution technology and old school technology, and it blowing up in everybody's faces.
Well, yeah, it was a lot of, you're right, it was the Second Industrial Revolution, and it was the latest and greatest of warring technology came face to face with 19th century tactics.
Right. So it's one of my favorite parts of history. So as you were rolling through that, and I realized that it was only 40 years prior to the First World War, I just thought it was kind of an interesting thought experiment and playing with the dates as to what if Custer had lived out a little bit longer to see the First World War.
There's when I was researching all this, there was a very, very, very old television show that I saw on YouTube. It's called What's My Line? And so I think this was recorded in like this was like 1930s, maybe 1940s. And basically they had people on there where you had like a board of 3 celebrities, and they had to try to guess what the profession was of this person or what this person knew. They had one guy on there. I mean, he was in his late 90s, and the panel of celebrities had to guess what this man's secret was. And the secret was that he was in Ford Theater when Abraham Lincoln was shot.
Oh, wow.
I'll try to find some of those links and send it to you.
Yeah, please do.
There was a pair of sisters on there whose, when they were little girls, their grandfather fought in the American Revolutionary War.
That's cool.
And so like that's the thing. It's just like when you look at this conflict, 1876. I mean, keep in mind it wasn't even 100 years later that Vietnam broke out.
Yeah.
And in that time from 1876 to 1976, we've had multiple world wars. We've had the invention of the computer, the beginnings of the internet. We've landed a man on the moon. The airplane was invented. Television was created. Like, there's a lot of stuff that went down in a very, very short period of time.
Yeah, I think when you put it in perspective, like for our listeners out there, put it into perspective and look at a timeline. And actually look at like how many years are between different events, because it seems like these two worlds are very far away because of the technological advancements that we have made, but really it's not that far away.
Before my grandfather died, he told me that my generation is going to be very hard pressed to see the amount of change that his generation saw.
Yeah.
So like, he was born in 1918. When he was a kid, horse and buggy was still common.
Yeah.
And by the time he died, when he died, look at all the stuff that he'd been through, that he'd seen, all the technological advancements. I mean, when he died, it was basically NASA was announcing, okay, yeah, we're working on going to Mars. And when he was a kid, the idea of an airplane was science fiction.
Right.
It just blows my mind that, just in that 90 some odd years that he was around, all the stuff that he got to see. And he knew people. I mean, he knew people who fought in the Civil War when he was a kid.
Yeah.
It just,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Blows the mind.
Pretty cool. I mean, okay, one last thing on this tangent, and then we'll probably wrap it up. But I also found some cool, like, super old interviews of people who were former slaves, of people who were not. I don't know if they were. I haven't watched these, but people who experienced the Civil War. Yeah. So you can find like super old interviews and actually listen to people who lived it, and I think that's awesome.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. I saw a few of those myself, and
so for our students out there, there's some really cool primary resources you can find on the internet. You just got to find them.
Just got to look it up.
Got to find them.
Only downside is that you're not going to find anybody from Custer's Last Stand.
No, because they're all dead.
Yeah. It's weird when they went out to recover the bodies. They really couldn't because they were afraid that they were going to be attacked by the Lakota, not knowing the Lakota had already like broken up and left.
Yeah.
But they were like, I'm going to put a stick in the ground where I see this body. I think it's this guy. I'm going to write his name on it. And then later on, they went out, and if you go out to Last Stand Hill and all that, it's basically the gravestones are sitting approximately where that person died.
That's a trip.
And so, like, you've got like Custer's Last Stand, or Custer's Hill, and you can see like there's dozens of gravestones all in a circle up there. You've got some that are way off to the side where they were cut off, and it's like you can go there and actually get a firsthand view of how it kind of went down based upon where somebody stuck a stick in the ground.
Jeez. Jeez Louise.
So yeah, that is the 3-part culmination of Custer's Last Stand. A ton of information, but I hope you guys enjoyed it thoroughly as much as I enjoyed researching it. This is one of these things that I thought it would be a clear-cut, simple thing, and it turns out no way. This was way more involved, and a lot more went on than what we're taught in basic elementary school. And the thing that I took away from it is that we are dealing with people that were actually human beings.
What?
Yeah. These were people that were trying to make do with the situation that they were given, and had to make some very, very hard choices, and they made some pretty hard sacrifices. But yeah, it's like once you introduce the idea that Sitting Bull was a human being, and Custer was a human being, and all these people are human beings, regardless of their flaws or qualities, they're no different than us
People
today.
be people, and people be people, and
people be people. So yeah, I think I'm good for the next couple of episodes. I know you've got your Hindenburg versus Hitler thing coming up.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun Succession type of situation set in 1932. So we're going to chat a little bit about World War I. We might touch on the Great Depression on the European side. We might talk about some undermining and some backstabbing and Nazis and how much we hate the Nazis and Hitler sucks and all of that. So
Yeah.
I'm excited.
But there's also, he also did some pretty incredible things too.
Hindenburg did, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did do some awesome things. That's why he was... Okay, nutshell. Hindenburg was a war hero, and then he was made Chancellor of Germany after the First World War. And then he was trying to hold it together, but also he really wanted to retire because he was ancient. And then some guy stabbed him in the back, kind of. But then in an attempt to make it all work and fix it better, the Nazi Party came to power. So there we go. In a nutshell, however, it is a lot more interesting and fun than I just gave you the 2 second. You're welcome.
Well, fair enough. I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, that's a wrap for this episode. I'll get this out as soon as I can. And in the meantime, let's keep it a hot mess.
Thanks for listening.